On the afternoon of January 23, 1969, in the auction rooms of Parc Bernet, galleries on Madison Avenue, a jeweler examined La Peregrina under halogen light before the sale. The Wanderer, 50 carats of teardrop pearl with a surface like frozen moonlight, rotated slowly as prospective bidders filed past the viewing case. The catalogue entry noted its provenance: Spanish crown jewels, Bonaparte exile, British aristocracy now consigned for public sale. In a matter of hours, Richard Burton would bid $37,000 by telephone, winning it for Elizabeth Taylor's birthday. But what the catalogue could not convey was the weight of centuries compressed into nacre. 3 years later, Taylor would commission Cartier to create a new setting: Spanish goldwork removed, modern rubies and diamonds installed, history reframed for Hollywood. The pearl itself remained unchanged, the same imperfect teardrop that had once declared divine right, now about to declare desire. Some jewels survive dynasties. This one outlived empires. Subscribe if you want to see how a single pearl witnessed 5 centuries of power and transformation. By the time Spanish records first documented La Peregrina in 1582, the pearl had already passed through hands history would never name. Discovered around 1513 in the Gulf of Panama, it emerged from depths measured not in feet but in human cost. An enslaved diver, identity unrecorded, nation stolen, name erased, brought it to light somewhere off the Isla de las Perlas. The pearl measured just over 2 inches in length, shaped like a falling tear. Its original weight was recorded at 223.8 grains, approximately 56 carats, making it one of the largest perfectly symmetrical pearls ever discovered. Spanish colonial administrators recognized immediately what they held: not merely a gem, but proof of divine favor made tangible. It entered the royal inventory with clinical precision: una perla peregrina de tamaño extraordinario, an extraordinary wandering pearl. The description noted size and luster, but recorded nothing of origin beyond Las Indias. The Spanish crown acquired it through mechanisms the archive politely termed tribute. It would be worn by queens for the next 3 centuries. It would never again touch the hands that found it. Philip II of Spain chose La Peregrina in 1554 as part of his betrothal gift to Mary Tudor of England, a statement in gemstones about Catholic alliance and dynastic legitimacy. Later accounts claimed Mary wore the pearl in portraits by Anthonis More, though modern scholarship disputes this identification. The pearl in Mary's portraits has been identified as a different gem, sometimes called the Tudor pearl. La Peregrina itself first appears securely in Spanish royal inventories in 1582 during Philip II's reign, where it was designated a crown jewel. The intended symbolism remained clear regardless. In the language of 16th century diplomacy, jewels spoke what treaties could not guarantee: faith, continuity, the weight of centuries. Mary's brief reign ended without an heir. Whether or not she wore La Peregrina, the pearl returned to Spain with Philip, who understood that crowns were temporary, but symbols endured. The marriage failed to produce the Catholic succession both courts desired. But the diplomatic message had been sent. It had been seen. It had been noted. Jewels remember what crowns forget. Through the 17th and 18th centuries, La Peregrina moved through the hands of Spanish queens with the regularity of inheritance law, but the intimacy of private trust. Margaret of Austria wore it in the early 1600s. Elizabeth of France, queen consort to Philip IV, appears with it in Velázquez's careful inventories of royal jewels. Maria Louisa of Savoy chose it for state functions in the early 1700s. The Royal Alcazar in Madrid kept meticulous records. Settings were changed, mountings modernized, clasps replaced as fashion demanded. But the pearl itself remained untouched, passed from throat to throat like a whispered confidence. Court painters captured it in oil, always at the neck, always central, always declaring continuity. Each queen who wore it understood the symbolism: she was temporary, the pearl eternal. The weight of it against the throat, cool, smooth, impossibly dense, became a kind of ritual. 3 generations of hands fastening the same clasp. For 250 years, it never left Spanish silk. The Peninsular War shattered that continuity. When Napoleon's forces occupied Madrid in 1808, his brother Joseph Bonaparte claimed the Spanish throne, and with it access to the royal jewels. Joseph possessed La Peregrina during his brief tenure as king, or so fragmentary records suggest. Spanish inventories show the pearl missing after 1808. Whether this was gift, seizure, or simple theft remains historically unresolved. What is certain is that the symbolism shifted. The pearl that had declared Spanish divine right now represented French imperial legitimacy. Empires do not request, they transfer. The Bonapartes fled Spain in 1813, taking what they could carry. Joseph Bonaparte left the pearl to his nephew, Napoleon III of France. Whether La Peregrina traveled immediately with Joseph or surfaced later through different channels, the archive does not clarify. But by the 1840s, the pearl had crossed another border. It had left royal inventories entirely. Empires rise, pearls transfer. When La Peregrina next appeared in documented records, it was in London, purchased in the 1840s by James Hamilton, Marquis of Abercorn, for his wife Louisa. The sale mechanism remains uncertain. Some records suggest a private transaction, others suggest an auction. What is verifiable is that the pearl entered British aristocratic hands and remained there for over a century. Victorian society portraits show Louisa wearing it at evening functions, the pearl reimagined as personal ornament rather than crown jewel. It appeared in candlelight at London balls in family photographs, in the controlled glamour of the British upper class. The symbolic transformation was complete, from Spanish legitimacy to imperial war prize to aristocratic trophy. The Hamiltons understood what they possessed, a relic of faded courts, but wore it without the weight of divine mandate. It was beautiful, it was rare, it was theirs, no coronation required. It had been a throne's companion, now it was a trophy. For the next 90 years, La Peregrina lived in relative obscurity, inherited through successive dukes of Abercorn. It appeared in family portraits, was loaned occasionally for exhibitions, and it resided in estate vaults between public showings. The Hamilton family archives document its passage, from the first duke to the second, from the second to the third. Each generation wore it less frequently than the last. By the mid-20th century, it had become what many great jewels become in private hands, a relic more referenced than displayed. Museum curators knew of it, jewelry historians noted its provenance, but it no longer carried political meaning. It had become a family heirloom, in the most ordinary sense, valuable, historic, and increasingly irrelevant to public life. The pearl's meaning had faded from symbol to possession. Beauty without power is just beauty, until Hollywood called. On January 23, 1969, at a Park Bernay auction in New York, Richard Burton placed the winning bid, $37,000, for a 16th century pearl to give his wife for her birthday. Elizabeth Taylor turned 37 4 days later. The sale made international headlines, not for the pearl's royal history, but for the celebrity spectacle. Cartier had intended to purchase it for resale. Burton outbid them by telephone from his hotel room. Press coverage focused on the romance, the actor buying the actress an historic jewel. But the symbolic shift was more profound. For the first time in its documented existence, La Peregrina belonged to someone who had chosen it, not inherited it, not received it as dowry, not seized it as conquest. Taylor wanted it. That was reason enough. Dynasties commanded it. She simply wanted it. The most famous incident in La Peregrina's modern history occurred within months of purchase. At the Burton suite in Caesar's Palace in Las Vegas, the pearl went missing. Taylor discovered it in the mouth of one of her puppies. Accounts vary between a Pekingese and a small terrier, which had found it on the floor and was chewing it like a toy. Taylor recounted the story in interviews and her memoir, with the humor of someone who understood the absurdity. A jewel that had survived Spanish wars, French occupation, and British aristocracy nearly destroyed by a dog. The contrast was complete. Spanish court protocol had dictated who could touch it, when it could be worn, how it should be displayed. Now it rested in a velvet-lined dog bed, rescued just before irreversible damage. It survived wars. It nearly ended in a terrier's jaw. In 1972, Taylor commissioned Cartier to design a new setting. Alderante created a necklace of extraordinary complexity, alternating rubies and diamonds, platinum and gold, with La Peregrina as the central pendant. The original Spanish goldwork, centuries old and historically significant, was carefully removed and archived. Cartier's design sketches, preserved in their archives, show Durante's intention to frame the pearl in modern luxury, to separate it from its royal past, to make it unmistakably Taylor's. The symbolic erasure was deliberate. Each mounting of a jewel is a rewriting of its story. The Spanish setting had declared divine right. The Cartier design declared personal choice. Taylor wore the finished necklace to the Academy Awards and to Princess Grace of Monaco's birthday party. In photographs from both events, the pearl catches light with the same teardrop shimmer it had shown in Velázquez's court. But the meaning had changed. Each mounting is a kind of forgetting. She wore it like it had always been hers. For the next 42 years, La Peregrina answered only to Elizabeth Taylor. She wore it to film premieres, museum galas, private dinners, and portrait sittings. It appeared on magazine covers, in Vogue editorials, and in coffee table books about celebrity jewelry. The pearl had become what it had never been in Spanish hands, a personal talisman. Insurance records from the 1980s valued it in the millions. Exhibition loans brought it briefly to the Smithsonian and to the Louvre, always with the understanding that it would return to Taylor. When she planned her estate, she listed La Peregrina among items to be auctioned after her death, a practical decision that acknowledged what the Spanish crown never could: jewels outlive their wearers. The pearl's journey had become Taylor's biography. She had transformed it from relic to possession. Her ownership was not inheritance or conquest, but purchase and intention. She had chosen it. She had saved it from a dog. She had worn it as herself. For 42 years, it answered only to her. Elizabeth Taylor died on March 23, 2011. 8 months later, on December 13, 2011, Christie's New York held the estate auction that would set records and rewrite jewelry market expectations. La Peregrina, catalogued with full provenance, photographed in the Cartier setting, accompanied by scholarly documentation of its royal history, sold for $11,842,500, the highest price ever paid at auction for a pearl. The buyer remained anonymous, as Christie's terms permitted. Press coverage emphasized the celebrity premium. Taylor's ownership had increased the pearl's value far beyond its historic significance. But something else had occurred. The pearl had returned to silence, from public royal display to private aristocratic possession to Hollywood spectacle to nothing. No photographs, no exhibitions, no loans. The anonymous buyer had purchased not just the pearl, but the right to remove it from view. The pearl returned to silence. Today, La Peregrina resides in an undisclosed private collection. Museum curators occasionally inquire about loans. Scholars request access for study. Exhibitions on royal jewelry note its existence, but display only photographs and empty mounting replicas. The pearl that was once inventoried in Spanish royal archives, painted in court portraits, worn at imperial functions, and photographed on Hollywood red carpets, has become invisible. Contemporary discussions about its legacy now include questions earlier eras never asked. Who owned the labor that discovered it? What were the costs of colonial extraction? Is beauty complicit in the violence of its acquisition? Museum catalogues carefully note present location, private collection, a phrase that functions as both fact and erasure. The question remains unresolved, deliberately so. Whose jewel is it? The divers, the crowns, Taylor's, or the buyers? History doesn't resolve, it accumulates. The pearl has now existed for approximately 500 years, longer than any empire that claimed it, longer than any hand that wore it. It has witnessed the collapse of Spanish imperial power, the rise and fall of Napoleon, the dissolution of British aristocracy, the invention of Hollywood celebrity, and the concentration of wealth in anonymous private collections. From symbol of divine right to colonial extraction to dynastic legitimacy, to imperial spoils to aristocratic ornament, to celebrity possession to capital investment, the pearl's meaning has transformed with each transfer, while the pearl itself remains unchanged. A museum card in Madrid's royal collections displays a replica mounting with the notation original location unknown, the same imperfect teardrop, the same nacre surface catching light. But the light has changed. What once illuminated divine authority now reflects only glass and absence. The velvet case in the museum display sits empty. Somewhere in climate-controlled darkness, the pearl waits. It will outlive its next owner too,